Let us now continue with our class on the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. Now we are currently studying the training in the 6 paramitas. Previously, we have already covered the training in generosity, training in precepts, in discipline, and then training in patience. We have already covered those 3. Beginning from today, we will talk about the training in diligence. In our last class, we have already covered the training in patience. Patience is so important. But of course, as mundane beings, patience is very difficult. I think if we were to simply listen to the Dharma teachings and to simply parroting the Dharma teachings, it's not going to help you that much. It's not going to be very helpful or that helpful. Myself included, whenever I give Dharma teachings, I feel really joyful. But if we do not practice upon it, then it is not considered as considered to be a successful Dharma practitioner. Myself included, because I got angry because of something that's very small. And afterwards, when I contemplate upon it, I thought it was really nothing. Why did I get angry over such a small thing? So sometimes when I think about my aggression, when I think about such kinds of things, I do lose confidence in myself, because I've been staying here for so many years, I've been teaching for so many years, and if I were to still get angry over small things, then that is quite disheartening. Sometimes we really couldn't control our mind, because the mind of the mundane beings are hard to control, are very uncertain. Just over some very simple causes and conditions, we could lose our temper. Well, because I let loose of my temper in the morning, so for the whole afternoon, I felt quite uneasy in my mind. And the reason is because I've been studying Dharma for so many years, and I feel that I haven't really engaged in diligent practice. Now, when it comes to myself, I've been teaching since 1985, and I don't have a quick temper. But to myself, I think if we don't have a method to control ourselves, it is not very optimistic. Because if the Dharma is Dharma and our mind stream is our mind stream, if it is very much separated, if Dharma does not merge into our mind stream, then we are not very successful practitioners. I've heard from various sources that many of our fellow practitioners have difficulty in control their behavior, their speech. They would get their mood would get fluctuated through even a little bit of obstacle. So also on top of that, they would get quite worried about little things, and all of those kinds of behavior and those kinds of fluctuation of emotions really demonstrate how insufficient your mind training is. But I take responsibility of all of your insufficient practice, because I've been teaching for so many years, and mainly on the theory. If I do not emphasize on the actual practice of the Dharma, then obviously you would get influenced by that. We've been studying for the Dharma for so long. If your mind stream has not been changed and transformed, then it is the time for all of us to engage in the actual practice. And I would call for the practice of patience for 100 days for all of us as a Sangha. Each of us within this 100 days would make observation of our own mind stream and would make observation of our speech and actions. It is difficult to make notes of each and every thought that arises if it is aggressive, but at least if it shows through your speech and action, you need to write it down. I get in touch with various kinds of people every day, and I don't get irritated easily or aggravated easily by others. But this time, I noticed that out of really nothing, I got angry. I know that the others are Buddhists as well, and I'm sure it is fine, but I think it's necessary for us to take precautions and to take action to work with our negative emotions. So beginning from tomorrow, we will work on our own aggression for 100 days. We will honestly write down all of our aggressive moments. I myself would also do that. For 100 days, I would note down how many times I got aggressive in my speech and action. Not so sure if everyone would be here for 100 days, because we don't know when impermanence would dawn. Look at Shinzo Abe. He passed away within just a few seconds. This is just impermanence. As long as there is impermanence, it is of the nature of change. And as long as it upholds such nature, it is not bliss. Knowing that it is impermanent, we need to take the opportunity to engage in the actual practice, and we can make the record of it. For example, you can write down your actual behavior of aggressive speech or aggressive actions, and you can make a faithful record of it. And then at the end of 100 days, you can take a look at your own behavior, whether you have made improvements or not. I've heard that many people within our Sangha would use the speech of aggression or with action of aggression. So I think that is why it is important to make a record of it. Though this is a very basic way of engaging in the actual practice, but I think it could be quite practical. Maybe it is because of my age. Within the recent years, I've generated more renunciation. I'm not using renunciation as a buzzword, rather I genuinely developed that insight. So I really hope that all of us can engage in the actual practice to investigate and truly make observation of our practice of patience. I hope that you vow in front of the three jewels to not hide and not disguise. There's really no need for it anyways. At the end of each month, you can, for example, as a group of a class, you can make a summary of everyone's progression. In this way, I think it would be better for your own practice. I understand that there are many practitioners over here. You have a good temper and you have a good level of practice, but also I've heard that there are fellow practitioners that has quick temper and have afflictions and aggression towards your fellow Sangha members. And in this way, if you have quick temper, if you have bad temper towards the fellow practitioners, then you should understand your level of practice is, or your practice is rather not successful. As we had already stated previously, even one moment of aggression would destroy the accumulation of merits of the hundreds of aeons and even thousands of aeons. It is not just an oral expression. It is true that even a moment of aggression would destroy all of the virtuous roots in our mind stream, and especially if the object, if the person that we're being aggressive to, let it be the fellow Sangha member or the monastics, so especially if they are Bodhisattvas, then such kind of karmic implication would be quite terrifying. If you don't believe in causes and fruition, if you don't believe in karma, then it is, of course, we don't have to say anything more. But if you do, then you would understand how terrible it could be. If our practice is not successful living in this world, especially pretending to be a practitioner within the Sangha, I don't think it's very meaningful to do so. On one hand, I do regret that I got carried away by my temper today out of nothing. On the other, I have to say that practicing patience did get me prepared to face all kinds of slanders and harms. Even there were quite a few times people would threaten me with knives. And so I think in that way I could speak as a teacher to give you advice on practice on patience. Sometimes we could practice patience when the situation is rather harsh, but not able to practice when it is out of really nothing, but it is created by people who are close to us, such as our Vajrasangha, such as our relatives. This is the other side of practice. I am speaking of all of these today. It is not because of a particular situation. It is rather my own mindset today, and maybe a sign of my renunciation, and maybe a sign of losing confidence in my own practice. And maybe you would see me and see this advocate as laughable, and maybe you would be in quite a sync with me in this stage of practice. Whichever way it may be, beginning from tomorrow, let us investigate and make observation of our aggression. Venerable Atisha taught on one should measure one's practice by making observation of how much dualistic thoughts would arise, and it is not even on the coarse level of ignorance, arrogance, and greed. In the study, while we're studying the 37 practices of Bodhisattva, we can see that Gyaltse Tokme would practice all of such practices and teachings himself. So we need to also adapt the teaching, we need to train the teaching, we need to test the teaching, we need to test our mindset, we need to test our level of practice, just as how the worldly beings or how the people in the secular environment would try and test. For the same reason, as practitioners, we need to make records of our afflictive emotions, of aggression, of the aggressive language and actions. After making such record, you can make observation of how successful your practice is. This is really the addition that I'm making for the class that we had last time on the topic of patience. Today I had lots of meetings, especially meetings with the management, and because I had lots of work and I didn't sleep well last night and I didn't have dinner. I only had an apple, so I probably don't have too much energy to give teachings, and I hope that you can understand it. Let's look at today's class on the training in diligence. Even the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas who accomplish only their own benefit are seen to be as persistent as those extinguishing a fire burning in their hair. It is the practice of the Bodhisattvas to master diligence, the source of all qualities, for the benefit of all beings. Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas wish to accomplish mere peace and happiness for nothing but their own benefit. When they train on the path, they are seen to engage with the diligence so intense that it is likened to the endeavors of someone who in an emergency extinguishes a flame that has been ignited his own hair or clothes. Whenever we see any fire that's burning our own hair or clothes, we would be in such an emergency state to extinguish it. Just like that, having given rise to a mind that aspires to supreme enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, one trains in the various vast and difficult conducts of the Bodhisattvas. If one were to simply wish to attain happiness and peace for oneself, would train with such great diligence, then for all of us who made the aspiration to benefit all beings in front of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, we have to be even more diligent so that we can benefit sentient beings. Thus, it is needless to mention that one must engage in a similar vast sense of diligence, the source of all good qualities. Therefore, to train in the three kinds of diligence in order to accomplish perfect enlightenment is the practice whereby Bodhisattvas train in the paramita of diligence. From precious garland of middle way, diligence is indeed to be found of virtue. The way of the Bodhisattva also explains diligence means being found of virtue. The essence of diligence is to be fully delighted when focusing on the object of virtue. Moreover, all bodhisattvas master diligence in three ways. The first, armor-like diligence. This is the first aspiration one should make, and it is just like an armor. You have to make that aspiration first, that I will be diligent. It means joyfully donning the great armor of courage. The second, the diligence of gathering virtuous properties, is to apply oneself to authentically accomplishing the virtue of the paramitas and so forth. The third, the diligence of benefiting sentient beings, is to benefit sentient beings in any way that is free from evil. The ornament of the sutras and in the Abhidharma treasury, there are 5 kinds of diligence being explained over there. I didn't really look into it, but I remembered from the ornament of sutras, it has 6 kinds of explanations, or rather categories, because it talks about the causes, the duration, the function, the category, and the endowment. I believe there are 6 categories. And then there are the categories that can be divided through the object, through its entity, and through its function and the preliminaries. There are various kinds of categories. I'm not so sure how the Abhidharma treasury divides the categories or the different kinds of diligence. As to the faults of refraining from being diligent, the Sutra of the application of mindfulness states the following: the sole basis for all negative emotions is laziness. Whoever is lazy, that indolent one, lacks all virtuous properties. the worst kinds of non-virtue, according to Buddhism, is laziness. If one is lazy and indolent, then one would not be able to practice the Dharma for sure. Hence, if one lacks diligence, having fallen under the power of laziness, one is deprived of all virtuous properties. All benefit in this life and in the future will thereby degenerate. In fact, laziness and indolence, if a person were to only engage in frivolous chattering, then that's a lot of distraction and laziness that would lead to the degeneration of benefits for this life and future lifetimes. I've recently heard lots of people telling me some of the fellow Sangha members, especially some of the senior Sangha members, they really like to engage in frivolous chattering. And once they do so, I lose faith in the fellow Sangha members. Sometimes they would talk about all kinds of rumors, some of which are not rooted in facts at all. I really hope that all of you would be able to make observation of all kinds of rumors that's going around. Otherwise, all kinds of noises would be spreading around all of us. Some of the rumors were spreaded with some kinds of purpose or some kinds of intention. Some of the rumors would focus to make you feel fear, and some of them slandering, and so on and so forth. And those could be quite terrifying. Maybe it is because I've seen lots of the negativities around me. Maybe it's my fault of seeing that. But if I receive such kinds of feedback from lots of people, then it really shows that there could be such problems going on within the Sangha. And I hope the management team could find out who is the source of spreading those kinds of rumors. Within the monastics, within the practitioners, we really shouldn't be spreading rumors. There are lots of rumors being spreading around, especially some of them are slandering, and some of them are without any foundation in facts. And if we were to find out who is making those kinds of rumors, then you would be asked to stop listening to classes, stop to attend the classes within our small classes and big classes, large classes. I've heard all kinds of rumors, who's the spy and who got caught and who's very much connected to the certain police departments and so on and so forth. Those kinds of rumors, of course, if they're true, then you can speak of it, but if they're not, then it is not necessary. I hope the management team, Khenpos and Khenmos, could look into it. Because passing on all kinds of rumors and all kinds of information is not necessarily helpful. We are going to get a group of people, those people who spreaded those rumors, to find them out and then investigate into it. For those people who started to create those rumors, this is actually the quality I really dislike. The secular people, for example, the merchants and businessmen, they would speak of untruthful words for their purposes. In fact, there are people who speak of untruthful words for their own benefit. They would create great harm. In the third or fifth chapter of the advice to the king, composed by Mipa Rinpoche, he specifically gives teachings on how to use speech. Some of the speech are to be completely abandoned. I am not joking today. I am very serious about the current situation. I really sincerely ask you to look into who's been spreading those rumors. Those kinds of rumors that had created certain results that could be harmful to Larungar, especially if those rumors get into the other parts of the society. It could be devastating, and this is such a foolish behavior. Before we talk about diligence, though we may seem to be all practitioners and monastics, if we do not practice diligently, if we do not even be a good person, then we would be very much corrupted as a Sangha. And if we're corrupted, then what's the use of studying Mahayana Buddhism? Mahayana Buddhism is simply a buzzword for us and not a genuine practice. We really need to focus on the genuine meaning of the teaching. Now, let's get back to the actual teaching. Over here it says that according to the ornament of the sutra states the following: among the gathering of goodness, diligence is supreme. Based on it, qualities are attained. There are many statements that speak in this way. In entering into middle way, as well as it is said, all qualities follow diligence without exception. From the way of the Bodhisattva, thus patiently I shall persevere in diligence. For those who exert themselves will find enlightenment. Such statements abound. If all Shravakas and particular Buddhas who are only accomplishing their own welfare need to engage very strongly in diligence, then it is reasonable for all Bodhisattvas to engage in a diligence that is even 100 times greater. Concerning this, we have the following statements from ornament of the sutra. Carrying the great burden of sentient beings on his head, it is not fitting for a great Bodhisattva to move about leisurely. Since I and others are bound tightly by fetters, it is appropriate to increase diligence 100 times. For those people who had made the aspiration of bodhicitta, you should be in a state of being quite busy in performing activities that's beneficial to the other sentient beings. If you have already made the aspiration of bodhicitta but do not want to engage in anything, you're too lazy to do anything, then other than creating negative deeds, then it is really nothing very dignifying about yourself. It is because looking at the sentient beings being fettered in samsara, we need to have the 100-folds of diligence to liberate them. According to the Tibetan translation, it says that since I have already vowed to liberate sentient beings, if I do not actually perform such activities, rather, if I were to leisurely carry out my life, then that is rather quite undignified. As for the source of all qualities, ornament of the sutras mentions that the source of all qualities is diligence. So it teaches how to accomplish the extraordinary diligence from which all mundane and super mundane qualities appear. Moreover, Lord Atisha said the following: because of laziness, we're still left behind, so kindle the diligence of practice like fire. He continues, no heroes are harmed by the enemy. All diligent ones are free from obstacles. The ones who are diligent, then their obstacles would naturally be dispelled. I indeed think that is true. Every time there is obstacles, they would definitely be defeated. If the practitioner is rather indolent, then even one strike of the obstacles, they would be defeated. But for the diligent ones, they would continuously to persevere with diligence. So the diligent ones, the ones that's with greatest diligence, then even the Maras would be terrified of them. The most indolent ones, even the Maras, would not care to spend time with them. It is really the ones that's not too diligent and not too indolent. Those kinds of people would encounter more obstacles, it seems. Then he continued, and then as well as Gompawa explained, the root of diligence comes down to contemplation of death. Potowa spoke the following: in order to accomplish enlightenment, we ordinary beings need to practice for a long time with diligence that is extremely forceful and uninterrupted. Nowadays, I can notice that lots of the fellow practitioners in our after-class presentation group, they would show up every day, but sometimes they would not even prepare beforehand, and that is not very meaningful. But of course, I know it's a very small number of you who are doing that. I think that at times of studying any kinds of Dharma teachings, we need to have a strong sense of faith, and we need to have great courageous diligence. The courageous mind is so important. Once we have those kinds of courage, whatever you would do, let it be chanting, practicing, and meditating, then you would be able to succeed. Otherwise, you would be simply performing an act. On top of that, we need to persevere with diligence so that you don't have to repeat over and over again or restart over and over again. Nowadays, we have already finished our summer holiday. For the lamas, they have already started to collect all the cell phones back and to keep them away from all of our fellow monastics. All the Khenpos and Khenmos would start to have classes, and for the Khenpos and Khenmos do not have classes, then they would deduct the points. Starting from tomorrow, I hope the management team would be able to give me a list of the Khenpos and Khenmos who have not started their classes yet. I already stated that I will resume my class on the 9th or the 10th. And I have already kept my promise. Some of the Khenpos and Khenmos, however, they kept on postponing their class. They don't want to give classes on time. The Tibetan lamas made this compulsive rule that all the classes have to start tomorrow because they had already spent 10 days as a summer holiday over here. Some of the Khenpos, if they have not returned, then the points for their whole class would be lost. Then at the end of the year, their meritorious points would be deducted. In the future, we probably have to adapt that rule as well. Some of the Khenpos and Khenmos, I think the senior ones, they pay close attention to the time that they would have classes, but some, I think they don't pay enough attention. Tomorrow, I hope you can give me a list of classes. We have to keep to our schedule. Tomorrow you can give me the stats, and if you don't give me the stats, then I would not be able to give classes day after. By the time I return to give teachings tomorrow, if certain Khenpo and Khenmo is still not back from the summer holiday, then I would particularly, let's say, praise you in front of everyone, saying that you have enjoyed your summer holiday really well. By tomorrow, I hope that you can give me a list of the Khenpos and Khenmos who have not returned. To continue, then Potowa said that if impermanence is born in one's being, it becomes the cause for the first type of diligence, which is armor-like. So he started off with the first type of diligence, the armor-like diligence. Has impermanence born in our being then? If we can have the cause, which is the impermanence, is born in one's being, then the first type of diligence, which is armor-like, would be born. Karagpa said, since no good qualities ever appear in someone lacking diligence, meditate on impermanence and give up laziness. All these statements unanimously teach why it is necessary to master diligence. How, in order to do so, one must give up concern for this life. In Buddhism, the view of impermanence is quite unusual than any of the other worldly views. According to all kinds of teachings, all the great masters would say that if one were to be practicing on diligence, one has to give up on all kinds of chores, and one has to give up on this life. If one can develop the certainty that one would die in 1 year, then one would be able to practice successfully. Then Gyaltse Tongmei himself taught the following: since through laziness you will accomplish the benefit of neither yourself nor others, give up other activities and endeavor in virtue. For the indolent ones, there are people who are, if one were to be indolent and lazy, then one would not be able to benefit oneself, don't even mention about others. One cannot take care of one's own bowls and washing the clothes and all of those kinds of livelihood chores. Then how could one benefit the other people? I know lots of the fellow practitioners indeed didn't squander your time, your summer time. You actually studied and made your recitation and engaged in lots of the studies of the Dharma. This is really wonderful. Over here it says that at all times, without ever being distracted, you should hold diligence as precious as your life. Do not waste other people's time, because time is life. The worldly beings would say that, the philosophers would say that. So at times when you invite others for a meal, do not chat for too long. This is not a place where you would engage the others in a worldly way. This is not a worldly center. This is not for you to make social connections or to watch movies, to squander your time. This is not like that at all. Look at the Jomos and Lamas. The majority of them are very diligent. And because of their diligence, many of them had tamed their mind stream and elevated their level of study and contemplation, and advanced their wisdom in practice. So beginning from now, we should stop all of our frivolous speech about our summer holidays or our all kinds of frivolous chatterings, like I used to do so-and-so, I used to be so-and-so. In Tibet, we would say that the men, after they get old, they enjoyed talking about how courageous they were when they were young, and women, after they got old, they loved talking about how beautiful when they were young. So whenever you started talking about yourself to the others, then you know that it's a sign that you're getting old. For those of you who really couldn't be diligent, then as Pongtsog Rinpoche had taught before, he said that even if you can't be diligent to yourself, at least you should not distract the others. Do not disturb the others. We should cherish and holding diligence as precious as our life. For people who are not diligent, since they do not care for their time and life, sometimes they would distract the others. But for people who are diligent, they have a sense of time, even for 1 minute or 2 minutes, even for a phone call, they would see it as life. And they would try to hold on to their time so that they can use it at virtuous deeds, on virtuous deeds. That is to say, I really hope that every one of you would be able to could arrange your time properly, and at least you should have that sense of time. And even if you can't do that, at least you should not distract the others. Over here it says that he himself made aspiration prayers to train in the 3 kinds of diligence, and likewise made them his practice. Jirga nanchi rang chuba zhubum sunen zhuba zhuba xiong